and we'll be able to post it afterwards, or you can share it with any of your coworkers who can be here. Victoria will be fielding questions, so feel free to send those in. And this will probably be a little bit shorter, but hopefully really good information, and we'll be able to, kind of connect on some things that are going on, and hopefully bring some new ideas or refamiliar yourself, make some old ideas more familiar. So first things first, we have some new information to send your way. There is additional or a new APR gathering portal coming out. It's called Sage. This is something we're getting bits and bits of more information from our HMIS HUD webinars that we are with them, and we listen in and we get new information about that. So this is a new APR entry point called Sage. It's going to be coupled with a new APR. The report itself should still remain available as we see it now with the papers and the drilling aspects, how you can go in and see individual information, the way it's broken apart should still be available, but there's going to be a new APR. It's going to be aggregate information. It's going to be all summary information, so you won't be able to drill in like you did before. This is going to be more encrypted in that way. Before we had concerns of emailing and transferring data and those sorts of things. This is going to be all aggregate surface level, less identifying markers on your data. And they're going to be a series of CSV files that are exported and then uploaded into Sage. eSnaps isn't going away. That is still going to be available, so if you started doing that, it's still going to be there. Don't worry there. But it is transitioning into Sage. If you've done something like the Caper export or SSVF uploads, I think it's going to be similar to that. We don't have a lot of information right now. Sage is going to begin in April. That's the rollout date, April 1st. Just be on the lookout for trainings that may be coming to you or your organization on using the new APR and Sage. Unfortunately, we don't have like a whole lot of information about it or how it will look yet, but my understanding is it is going to be CSV export out of HMIS, and it will be imported into Sage. All corrections and everything must come out of HMIS, so you won't be able to do any sort of manual data updating if there's something that might not be put into HMIS yet, and you may make those adjustments in the APR on the fly. That will no longer be allowed, those sorts of things. I want to pause for just a second, see if we have any questions on Sage and the new APR that I can answer right away before moving on. And I'm not seeing any. Oh, bear with me just a moment here. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in right now. Just a greeting here. So, hello Javier, hope you're doing well. But yeah, so this is just something to keep on your radar, keep in mind. Sage is coming. The new APR will be exports and CSV files to be uploaded. So that's something to be excited for. New things are always fun and exciting, and we'll work through any challenges that come up as we always do. So no worries there, it'll all work out. Next, we'd like to move on to the UDQ updates. We were sending those universal data quality reports earlier this month. They went about 2 weeks ago. And I'm still trying to follow up with a bunch of y'all. Thanks for those of you that have responded. Thanks to those of you that have corrected all the data. I know there was a bit of a few bumps in the road for last UDQ. The ultimate data quality report wasn't quite as ultimate as we hoped. Um, yeah, that code just didn't quite land as we hoped it would. However, I do hope I was able to reach out with everyone, make sure that we are all on the same page, and by all means, still please continue to review your UDQs. If you received it and you replied saying, hey, we received it, and then it kind of fell to the side, please reach out to us. If you have questions, please reach out. Feel free to ask us anything you have about the UDQ, any sort of concerns you may have working with that stuff. Yeah, we're still working through it. I'm still trying to get in touch. But the data on the whole is looking a lot better. We're getting pretty excited about continuing solid data throughout the year so that there isn't a huge push to clean at the end. While we're on the UDQ subject, while our UDQ did not quite work as we had hoped, there is the new UDQ that's coming out that'll be produced by Client Track per HUD specifications. So it's going to do a few different things. It's going to give us a new breakdown in data. What that means is that right now we have about 17 universal data elements. The problem with that is that they aren't all actually universal data elements. Many of them are specified based on what was asked. So if you do different questions, you'll get different results in the entry assessment there. So this is going to break things down by like personal identifying information, common information. It's going to be different brackets. And again, we don't have a whole lot of that information quite yet, but it is going to look at things in a new way that's designed to be more helpful, more user-friendly. It's also going to be more program specific. So one of the things that we were trying to get our UDQs to do is to look at something like, an RHY program and say, okay, they have additional or different things that need to be required as opposed to an emergency shelter or even supportive services program. So this UDQ is going to take all that into consideration. It is going to, as I said, be program specific. It's going to be specialized and look at the data in new ways. However, ultimately, it's still going to be one of those things where we're just trying to check up, make sure we're not putting in a bunch of data not collected, make sure we're not missing a lot of things. So at its core, it's the same. However, I think we're all really excited about how this new UDQ will pan out and hopefully help each specific program improve the data quality of what they specifically need. Okay. So yeah, I know we're always hitting on the data, how it matters when we're looking at things like APRs and system performance measures. So what we're going to do real quick is kind of compare the two. First, we have the APR. That's looking at our data from a project level perspective. It's looking more at persons served, the data quality of those individual persons. It's also looking at income outcomes and housing outcomes. Income outcome is a little bit of an odd phrase there, but basically when we're looking at those financial assessments, that's what it's looking at. Housing outcomes, the exit destination, that's what it's looking at there. So that's one of the, again, one of those reasons why this data quality is so important is so we can see the improvement that these people are having in their lives, the improvement of income or job opportunities and housing opportunities and outcomes on the individual or project level. Compare that to the system performance measures. That's at a COC level. So it's really not looking at your individual project. When we start getting to the system performance measures, that's one of the reasons why we hit data quality so hard, is because it really is affecting everyone in the software, because we're all working together, no I in team. This is where that comes into play. So it is at the COC level. It looks at the time persons remain homeless. A big thing it also looks at is recidivism. So they're returning to homelessness. If we have someone who's, going through a program, exiting to a permanent housing situation, and then coming back multiple times, it's going to look for those sorts of things. Maybe there's something we could do there, or our recidivism rates there for the COC as a whole. It's also going to look at number of job or income growth, again, looking at those financial assessments from the entry assessment to the exit assessment, and each annual assessment along the way. It's also going to look at our numbers of first-time homeless and successful housing placement. So some of those are similar in the data it's looking at. However, it is looking at it in a different way. And the thing to keep in mind for this year and the system performance measures is that last year they were first introduced. They were kind of our baseline. We wanted to just submit them, have our system performance measures. It's where we were at. Okay. This year's system performance measures will be compared to last year's. So now's the time where we really have to make sure our data is as clean as possible, so we have the correct information. We're telling our story of the great work we're doing as a COC, the awesome things that Texas to the Balance of State is doing, because it is getting compared to where we were last year. So that's just something to keep in mind. The system performance measures are coming up. Again, this is why we hit the data quality so hard. Okay. So that kind of transitions us over to Victoria. I'm going to, bear with me a moment here. I'm going to make her the presenter.
Right, sorry. I was talking for a couple of seconds there, but I didn't realize that I was muted. Hopefully everyone can see my screen at this point. If you can't, let us know. Lisa, I am looking at your question in regards to CAPER, so just hold on tight and we will get to that soon. For right now, I do want to cover, while we're on the subject of data quality and the UDQ, how can you find out if one of your clients needs a annual assessment, right? So maybe your client has been enrolled in your program for a couple of years, but maybe you're not exactly sure if they need to have an annual assessment done, right? There's a couple of different ways that you can do that in the system. There's no set reports that will automatically tell you who needs to do that, so we kind of have to look at some workarounds. The first type of report that I would try running is an APR. For this example, I am going to look at a date range of last year, though of course your APR might look a little different in terms of date ranges. I'll select a grant program as well as a grant component. I usually leave the grant unchecked and instead move on to the project type and selecting the program specifically. I'm going to run this report. And of course, it's going to take a little while. Come on, client track. Well, okay, here we go. Now, for a lot of you, the APR is going to look really familiar. Since we're kind of going to be getting a new APR that's going to be put into Sage, we're not exactly sure how this is going to look when that new APR rolls around. We're thinking that it's going to look somewhat similar to this in that client track would provide something like what we would think of a paper APR. I think of this as kind of like a paper APR, something that you can print. For now, one thing that we want to check to see if our client needs an annual assessment is looking at their financial information. So I am going to kind of jump ahead here in the report to look at their income information. And you can usually find this on either Q23 or Q24. You'll see that I only have one client enrolled in my program, and I have here that that one client is missing their income at latest follow-up. And I might think, okay, well, how do I figure that out? How do I find that client? On the APR, a majority of the headers are links that you can click on, and that's going to pop up a separate report viewer. If the client is missing their financial information, that is a very good indication that they need to go through an updated annual assessment. What that's going to look like in the report viewer, you'll see that it'll specifically say assessment ID is missing. Even if the client hasn't been exited from the program, what this report does is it pulls the latest assessment, right? Even if they haven't exited, it pulls the latest and it looks to see if it has that financial information. Now, one thing that I also want you to keep in mind is that this is only for those clients who are asked that financial information to begin with, right? So you might not, or you will not see minors who need to have an updated assessment. Now, I would automatically go ahead and search for that client. There's David Bowie right here, and I can see that he only has an entry assessment for that rapid rehousing program, and he needs to go through another one. But once I get to the adults, that's when I would go ahead and check to see if they have any family members in that enrollment. And if they do, then those family members also need to have an annual assessment completed for them. So that's one way that I would check for assessments. There is another way, and let me see if it's in this menu option. Okay, it's not. I'm going to switch out of here really quickly to show you guys another menu option that you can use with just, you know, kind of a heads up that it might not always work, and there's a reason for that. If you are looking at your My Client Track submenu and you hover over current enrollments, there is a menu option that says open enrollments with the most recent assessment. This is another menu option that you can try to kind of search for clients that are missing their annual assessments. Like I said, this does not always work. And the reason why that is because it looks at almost all of the data that we have in this system. And that is a lot of data to look at. So you can see right now that Client Track is kind of not wanting to do that for me. But I can select the program that I want to look at, say emergency shelter, and search. And it should tell me on the far right-hand side when that most recent assessment date was. So like this client, Testerton, he has not had an assessment since 2010. So that's a good indication that I need to go in and update this client's file. Ben, do we have any questions on that before I move over to utilization reports?
Not seeing any.
Okay. Come on, guys. Don't be shy. I like questions. All right, so now that we have looked at how to update, or not update, but how to track down clients who need annual assessments, let's go in and look at how to actually create one of those assessments. So I'm going to go into my client here, and I already know that David Bowie, let me look at his dashboard, I already know that he needs an updated assessment, right? The last one he did was in 2016. It's already 2017. So to create an annual assessment, you'll want to be on your client's dashboard. You're going to click on the blue action button next to the enrollment that you want to create that new assessment for. And then you're going to click on Update/Annual Assessment. Let me close this here to give us a little more space to look at. The first page you're going to see is the HUD program enrollment page. You can make any changes necessary. So if you needed to change the project entry dates, or since our client is in rapid rehousing, if you needed to add the date of move-in, you could do that. And the first question Client Track is going to ask you is, do you want to create a new assessment or do you want to update an existing assessment? Now I want to be very clear on this page what these two things mean. So if you remember when we kind of took a brief look at the assessments that David Bowie has, he only has one entry assessment for our rapid rehousing program, just the one. So if I were to click on Update Existing, it would take me to that one entry assessment. And I would then, if I were to type in any new information, it would go directly into that entry assessment. Now I don't want to do that. If I start typing over the information in the entry assessment, that's going to write over that initial information, right? And we don't want that. We want to keep the entry assessment as it is. Instead, we're going to create a new assessment. So the way that I always think about this when I'm thinking through this question, if I have absolutely new information about my client, then I need to create a new assessment. The next question it asks is the type of assessment. Do you want to create a during program enrollment or an annual assessment? Again, I know a lot of you are familiar with this. Annual assessment is for your clients that have been enrolled in your program for a year or longer. During program enrollment, that's a little different. You can create that kind of assessment at almost any point in the client's enrollments. We like to encourage users to create this during program enrollment anytime something major happens to the client. So anytime they get a job, or maybe lose a job, maybe they qualify for non-cash benefits, or they suddenly qualify for insurance and you want to capture that information, you can select during program enrollment. But for our client, for this example, we want to create an annual assessment because they've been enrolled in our program for a while now. Okay. Another thing that I want to point out in terms of annual assessments, you really want to be careful with the assessment date. So I know that we've talked about this in the past before, but just as a refresher, there is a 30-day window on either side of your client's enrollment date. What that means is you have 30 days before or 30 days after the month and day that the client was enrolled in the program. So there's kind of like a 60-day window frame there that you need to actually complete the annual assessment. If you kind of go through these assessments and you don't keep track of the assessment date, it might end up still showing up on the report as missing if that date doesn't fall within the report correctly. So I'm going to say that the actual assessment date that we did for this client was on the exact same day and month as their original enrollment. And then we're just going to go through the assessments here. So is the client covered by health insurance? For my client, this is a no. I'll save and move on. Barriers and special needs. Has there been any change to the client's barriers from the previous assessment to this one? I'm going to say no and save and close. No changes to be made there. Domestic violence, still a no for my client. Let's go ahead and move on over to income. If there hasn't been any change in your client's income from the previous assessment to this one, you can click on Default Last Assessment, and this is going to pull the information that you put in the previous assessment and put it into this one. I'm going to say, though, that my client now has earned income. It's from a part-time job. They make $575 a month. No non-cash benefits for them. Save and close. Client track's going to let us know that we are done. And there's not really a big visual cue on the dashboard once you finish that process that lets you know that you've updated that assessment or added a new assessment to your client. You can kind of tell by looking at the last assessment completed. You should see the date of the assessment that you just did. And also, if you hop on over and look at the client's assessments, you should see that there is now an annual assessment for your client's program. Any questions about that process whatsoever?
We have one that just popped in. Give me a moment here.
Sure.
For SSVF-specific programs, they require recertifications every 90 days. I have been doing new assessment during enrollment program. Is that correct, or should we be doing something differently?
You are doing it absolutely correct, Nanette. At the point where the client is in your program for a year, that's when you want to go ahead and do your annual assessment. For anything in between, like 1 day and 1 year, a during program enrollment type assessment is absolutely fine. Does that answer your question, Annette? Okay. I'm going to go ahead now and move on to utilization reports. This has been a question that has come up a lot recently. How can we look at or define utilization in this system? And Client Track has, I'm not really sure what's the best way of putting this. It has a couple of different ways that you can track utilization, and those ways are kind of dependent on what you need. So if you are a shelter or a housing program, you can look under, I'm in the wrong work group. 1 second. There we go. You can look on your shelter workspace. There should be a submenu called Housing Reports. And we have a couple of different ones here that we can look at. On this workspace, I want to focus on Housing and Shelter Utilization History Report. I'm going to change this to January 1st of 2016, and I'll keep the end date to today's date. And I'm going to look at both the shelter and the transitional home that we have here for our organization THN in this system. I'm going to run this report. And the Housing and Shelter Utilization History Report kind of looks like this. You'll see, and I know, again, a lot of you are familiar with this, but these plus signs on the far left-hand side of the row are sections that you can expand. So if I wanted to specifically look at the transitional home facility, because I see that there's a 15% utilization, I would just click on that plus sign, and the section expands so that I can see in June of 2016, there was 100% utilization. In July, there was 77%. Now, one thing about this report is that it gives you the average, right? Average daily number of occupants, average number of check-ins, average reservations. All of these numbers that you see here are averages. And that's one thing that I really want you guys to keep in mind when you're running this report. So, you might end up seeing numbers that look a little weird, right? This one says average daily number of occupants is 0% for May, but you have a utilization rate or an average utilization rate of 26%. And so you might think, well, what does that even mean? If you click on the plus sign next to that month, you should see that at some point in that month, you had a client who was enrolled for a couple of days here. But for the rest of the month, they were open, or that bed was open. And so what Client Track does is it takes all of these numbers and just averages them up. For some of your purposes, an average will work fine. In other instances, you don't want an average. You want, the real number. How many nights did a client stay? That is, unfortunately, a little harder to keep track of. The reason for that, let me minimize this and go to my client here. Go to Client Dashboard. Okay. The reason for that, in part, is how Client Track counts emergency shelter nights. A lot of you know that when you check a client into a bed, they are automatically given a check-in service. And it'll either say check-in emergency shelter, or it might just say emergency shelter. But you might have noticed that when you check a client into a bed and they get this service, that the units usually stay blank. And they will remain blank until you check the client out of their bed. And then Client Track will tally up the number of nights and then enter that as the units. That can be difficult and it can be tricky when you're trying to run something like a service report and you're looking at check-in services, right? Because the report isn't going to count a check-in service that is still open and still counting nights. So a service type report would be useful if you want to count only nights that have passed from clients that have already exited your program. But again, in a lot of instances, that's not really what you're looking for. One workaround that I like to use for this is looking at your clients and programs report. Let me just make sure. Okay. Go back over here and look at program reports and clients and programs. Sorry guys, Client Track has kind of taken a little while to load. I'm going to just leave the date range for this month. I'm going to leave my report type at enroll at any point, so it'll pull clients that are still open as of this month. I'm going to select my emergency shelter program and run the report. Okay, now when I expand this section, on this particular report, you should see on the far right the enrollment length for your clients. Even if the client is still enrolled, you will still get an enrollment length on the right-hand side. So this might be a more accurate way for you to count how many nights the client has stayed at your agency. And you can always run or export this data into Excel. And that would be a quick way to tally up how many nights of emergency shelter for all of your clients. Does anyone have questions about utilization reports or kind of tracking down how many nights a client would stay at a shelter or facility?
I don't see a question coming in, Victoria. However, for this particular report, the clients and programs, you made a point about the enrollment length, giving a time frame for how long they've been in the program. But could you look at McTesterson at the bottom? So one thing to note that the second to last column is the days, and the last column enrollment length. Enrollment length. What it's doing here is that it's going to give you the number of days for your report period. Because it was the month and February has 28 days and this enrollment is open, we're seeing that there's 28 days listed. But this enrollment started on 1/31st, 2017, so our enrollment date or enrollment length is 29 days. So if you are going to use
Which
that final
actually,
column, yeah, go ahead.
it's, all right guys, it's kind of embarrassing to point out in a webinar that's being recorded, but this is actually wrong. Because it's not February 29th of 2017. It's only the 23rd, so this should technically be 23 days, not 29.
Oh,
Dun,
yeah.
dun, dun.
I guess we need to make a ticket about that.
Yep, that's a ticket for client track,
Yep.
which totally negates this whole thing that I did of use the clients and program report.
But the clients and
For
program
the,
report is like super useful for other things.
yeah, for other things. Yeah, we'll get in touch with client track. You know, the end goal that I would expect here is that you will be able to rely on this report to tell you how many nights the client has stayed in your program. And it might even be, let me check this real quick, testing, what's that, Testington? It might be a matter of the actual 131. Let's look at the assessments. Yep, not sure about that. Sorry, guys. We'll definitely get back to you on why that report is showing a false number, an alternative number, I might even say. Okay, aside from this mess, do we have any questions? We don't have time to go into it right now, but if you would feel more comfortable with it, we could help you create a Data Explorer type report that would look to see or would look to count how many nights the client has stayed within your program within a specific date range. So that can work as well. Any questions? All right, I don't really see anything come in. If that's the case, then I can go ahead and pass it back to Ben,
Okay.
if that's all right with you.
Yeah, please
Go
do.
ahead and
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for all that, Victoria. It looks like my screen is back and I have all sorts of things to share with everyone. Those utilization reports and what we're about to get into is really one of those things like to help make sure your numbers are right. So often we'll be going through these UDQs or it's the end of the year and we're trying to clean up our data as much as possible and we find all of these clients that maybe weren't checked in at all. That stuff just it tends to happen. Things fall to the side. You get through an enrollment, and then you have to, go get a cup of coffee, and you think you'll check them in when you get back, but then you get a phone call, and next thing you know, it's completely slipped your mind. It happens to everyone. Happens to me. Um, so these are some of the things that we can do to make sure our data is as solid as possible. We want to end or wrap up the webinar with another little hot tip, pro tip here, that you can use the software really to your advantage, whether you're an administrator, monitor, manager, or just a data entry person. If you have a stack of people who need to be exited and you get to the end of the month or the end of the week and you just want to double check, make sure you didn't let anyone slip through the cracks, we got ways to do that. My favorite is the clients and programs report. We know that it's a little not the best. On the far right, there's a few issues with it that we're going to get cleaned up and figured out there. However, I do think it has a lot of really great uses here in just kind of keeping track of our data, making sure that we're on top of these exits, because again, like I said, we'll be sending out UDQs. You guys give us a call, say, hey, we got it, whatever. I run and look through the data with you. Honestly, each UDQ that went out, I'm pulling up myself. I am looking at that data. I am with you. We are a team. And I'll notice things, like it's an emergency shelter and someone's been enrolled in the program since 2013. And that's possible. You might have someone staying in your shelter for 4 years. However, that seems a little unlikely, especially when it's 2013 and they have no annual assessments. So that's one of those things where bare minimum, if they're in a program for the past 4 years, they should have 4 annual assessments. So sometimes that stuff kind of falls through. And a really easy way to send a net and catch everyone is to do a clients and program report. And what it'll do is it'll give you an option of report type. Whenever you see this report type, it really gives you a lot of flexibility here, because there's 3 main options. You have your enroll at any point, begin enrollment, and exited. And what we really want to look at is the enroll at any point. This is true for all of our major data reports. The AHAR, System Performance Measure, APR, everything works kind of like this. And what it's saying here is that if there's an enrollment that is open at any point in the date range, so right now we're looking at this month, then we want them in this report. So when we look at like a fiscal year, we go from September 30th to October 1st. If you have a client that was enrolled in that first fiscal year and it rolls to the next one, and a data change happened, or a data standard change happened, and there are these new data fields, those matter. Those need to be filled in. The new data standards apply to this older enrollment, and because they're open during the time of the data change. So the clients and programs report with an enroll at any point can really help make sure that your current clients are truly your current clients and not someone who should have been exited and fell through the gaps, and we have to go back and update. So what I'll do here real quick is an enroll at any point, and we're going to look at the rapid rehousing program because I know there's a client in here with all this, this is test data, and we'll click report. And it should show us David Bowie. Yeah, we got one person here. And so we can see the the same information we were just seeing with the clients and programs report that Victoria was just showing with us. We see the enroll date, the exit date is empty. So we know that we've had Mr. Bowie in our program since January 1st, 2016. And maybe he left like last May, and we just didn't get around to exiting him. So here's a good opportunity to see that. We can go look up his record and exit it. So the real helpful thing with all this is being able to see this data, seeing who's still in the program and may not be, who maybe isn't supposed to be. But you can do that and have it scheduled using the bottom right schedule report button. This is an awesome facet of our system that I hope gets used as it's great. So what you can do is have your clients and programs report scheduled to run, and it's going to run with the settings we just did. So it's going to look at the current month. Right? It's going to look at the current month, enroll point, enroll type, enroll at any point for whatever programs we select. It's going to let us name the report. So you can come in through, right now it's going to pull the username for user ID. It's looking at yourself there. But you can change that name if you'd like. The report recipients, right now it's for me. What'll happen is when it's done, I'll get an email from ClientTrack saying your report is ready. Log in and click this hyperlink and you'll be able to download your report. You can run it once daily, weekly, monthly. So if you're someone who's in the data all the time and you're like really familiar, you know exactly who should be in and who should not be in, weekly may be the one for you. If you're the person who's doing it, you're doing the most data entry, you can run this, even if you're just a standard data entry person. This doesn't have to be for monitors. And the weekly option does give you the opportunity to select something other than just once every week. You could do it every 2 weeks. So now you get this report about twice a month. You could do it monthly. Again, maybe for the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe you're someone who's not in the data as much. You can get it bi-monthly, maybe even every quarter. So like every 4 months, it's gonna make this report for you automatically. Whatever you need here, really, that would be best for you. Minimum, I would say every month. So that way you could have it schedule the end of the month, you get this report and you know who is still in your programs going into the next month. That's just a great way to stay on top of your data and know exactly what you're doing, where you're at. You can select the start date. So with February in mind, that's a little tricky. You might want to do the 28th, and that'll keep it going through the 28th for each month. The desired hour. Here's where it's fun, because you can have this run at 3 a.m. in the morning. So every month at 3 a.m. on the 28th of the month, you can have this report run so that when you get in the office, you get your coffee, a bagel, and you start your day with a clients and programs report. Who doesn't want to do that? It could be fun. Something I enjoy doing myself, running reports and reading through them. So the final thing to notice here is your export format. Now, you have the PDF option, and that's what a lot of times you'll want to export if you don't want it to be dynamic, right? So PDF is going to be static. It's going to be, you can't work with it. So we always recommend doing Excel, especially for something with the plus signs that expand. Excel is really the way to go. And you just hit schedule report. And then you get a little notification saying the report has been scheduled to run, and you can review them anytime by navigating to your scheduled reports. So you click OK. And you're good to go. Your scheduled reports are going to be found on your left in the menu over here under Saved Reports. Is that right? That doesn't quite seem right, does it? Oh, forgive me, I forgot where the scheduled reports are. Here's what we'll do. While the search bar at the top, gonna have to find where that's at. Send you all an update. Um, well, thought for sure I knew. Sorry about all that, guys. But scheduled reports, it's a good thing to have, and something you'll be able to use to keep on top of your data and see who is still in your program as you go through your month-to-month
So
activities.
hold on. Ben, if you click on my saved reports,
Yeah.
oh, you don't have it. So I'm in the HMIS Housing Programs Workgroup, and when I click on saved reports, there is a menu option in the top right-hand corner that
Yeah.
says scheduled.
Yeah.
There
Thanks,
we go.
Victoria. Sorry, it was blocked by my go to webinar panel. Um,
Oh, there we go. Okay.
so I couldn't see it because I was trying to monitor the webinar. Sorry, everyone. Yep. My saved reports, scheduled reports. Yep. And then here you can see the description, run report, clients and programs report for Benjamin Mahoney. You see it's monthly, um, every morning at 3 a.m. on the 28th there. So if you want to make any edits to it, you can do that. You can edit the report schedule. You can go to the report launch form. So you have some options here. Whew. Fun times in live webinars, right, guys? Um, Victoria, did you have anything else wanted to pop in and share?
Yes, so there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. The first is a question that we got for our webinar, but we got it through email. The DOORS coordinator asks, or Charity, excuse me, Charity asks, is most of HMIS just housing services? Their program is more or less helping foster youth get jobs, and she was told to use HMIS. Where do her services fall? So Charity, HMIS is not just about housing and emergency shelter projects. We have lots of projects and programs in the system that are, homelessness prevention or services only. In the case of your program, you wouldn't actually check your client into a bed. You wouldn't need to worry about running utilization reports. You would just need to focus on adding services to your clients, maybe doing case notes and goals with them. I hope that answers your question. If not, please feel free to get back in touch with us. Another thing that I want to talk about is I figured out what was going on with the clients and programs report. Ben, if you wanted to pass the presentation to me really quick,
Sure.
I can kind of rectify where things went a bit wrong there. All right. So, and I kind of feel silly about this because I look at this report almost every day, and this never occurred to me until just now. Your end date here is going to be very, very important. I have the end date set to, of course, the end of this month, and I'm going to run the emergency shelter report. And we're going to see, like we did before, that Testington has an enrollment length of 29 days. Now, this is what it's doing. It's counting the days all the way up to your end right there. Even if this day has not passed, it's still counting days up until this point. I want to show you how different it looks if I change this end date right here. So with an end date of February 28th of 2017, Testington has an enrollment length of 29 days. If I were to change the enrollment end date to today instead and run this report, we're going to see that, or at least I haven't actually tested this, so you can't see, but I'm crossing my fingers here. I think this is what's happening. We should see that Testington has been enrolled actually for 24 days because it's only counting the days up into this point. Does that make sense? So I guess the sort of caveat here would be that when you're running the clients and programs report and you want to get an exact count or an exact number of how many days your client has been enrolled, you want to make sure that the end date for your report is today's date. If you have it at the end of the month and the end of the month has not passed, it's going to include all of the days up into the end of the month. And that might not be accurate because you might have clients that actually exit out before the month is over, and so those numbers, the enrollment length, could potentially change. I hope I cleared that up. If anyone has questions about that, please let us know. Because for me, I've been working with this for like 2 years. That was not intuitive for me. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands how that works. Okay, I don't see any questions about that. Ben, are you getting any questions on your end?
Not about the clients and programs report, but thanks for clearing that up. I feel like those days always throw us off for occasionally. We do have a question about a UDQ specific data element. I would
Yeah,
I would
I
have
see
to
that.
look at it.
It's actually a good question that I think should be shared with everyone. So Lisa Griffin asks, is data element 3.917b newly added? And yes, it is. That's what you see now in the newer enrollments when you're doing an intake for a client on the universal data. That's part of the living situation, that set of questions there. Now, if you've been running UDQs, you might notice that questions in that section might show up as missing for your client. And when you go back and look, it might seem like they have all the data that they need. And the reason that that happens is because ClientTrack has not really updated the UDQ because they're going to be making another UDQ essentially. So this has kind of fallen on the back burner. If you see that happening, just let us know. I know a lot of you got in touch with us when the UDQs were being passed around. I'm kind of pointing this out. If your clients were enrolled through the date that those new data standards came into play, which was October 1st of 2016, then you probably will have to go back and update some of that data for them. But just the way the UDQ is set up now, it sometimes says that a client is missing data when they actually have everything that they need. This was totally not meant to turn into like a ClientTrack bashing session, but here we are. Okay.
Well,
Any other questions? Yes.
oh,
Go ahead, Ben.
it's just another like little point on the UDQ here. For those data elements too, a lot of times, well, can you pass the presentation back to me real fast?
Yeah, no problem.
Give me just a moment here, guys. Because a lot of those new data elements are coming through, and again, that idea of the client like persisting into the new fiscal year. Granted, the UDQ occasionally does pull in people saying they're missing data and they're not actually. Like if you go to that assessment, you'll see that you don't have the options to input the data there. It's just not available to you. However, Here we go. Sometimes you can look at the data, and this is something I've kind of alluded to occasionally in emails, but a hard part here is, if you have a blank spot for this approximate date homelessness started, that's a hard thing to move past because you can't leave it blank. There needs to be some sort of information there. However, when you're looking at the client and you're saying like, okay, this assessment date is 2/15/2016. I think the actual enrollment is 1/2016. So I'm going to update that real quick. But we know, okay, because of this information, length of stay in the prior living situation, 1 night or less. Okay, so this is 1/1/2016. Okay, so, if I find 1/1/2016, 1 night or less is December 31st, 2015, right? Um, Again, we can see something like this option right here, regardless of where they stayed last night, number of times client has been on the streets, an emergency shelter, or safe haven the past 3 years, including today. If this is set to one time, we know that this individual, because of some of this information before, they haven't been in a homelessness situation for over a month. So we can infer that it's 1 month. So sometimes, even if the client is no longer there or it seems like old data or whatever, we can we can use some of this information here to fill in the null. And your knee-jerk reaction would be, well, if we can do it, why can't the report just figure it out? Reports aren't that smart. They just aren't. Computers can't think. They just do exactly what they're told and what's in there. So if this is a new element that just appears and it's set to null or select, right? We can figure that out. Now, granted, if this information isn't this straightforward, we might not have that information, so we might have to put data not collected. That's a reality. It's not a happy reality, but sometimes that's just the case. However, if we can infer, if we can figure out like what's going on here, or if there's a case manager who worked with the client closely and knows some of this information, like, it is a case-by-case situation, but it isn't a case where we can just say across the board, data not collected. It's worth taking just a few moments to read through some of the information that's already put in and to try to gather a complete and accurate record as possible, because this is really marking our chronic homeless situation. So one of those data things that we're really trying to hit, like veteran status, trying to get as close to functional zero. At the same time, we need to know if our clients are chronically homeless and if they hit those benchmarks to get that classification. There really wasn't a question on that, but that's just something I've thought of since working through these UDQs with some of you guys. Just something to keep in mind.
All right. We're going to stay here for maybe a couple of minutes to see if we get any last-minute questions rolling in. And I know that we had scheduled this until 2:30. We might end up wrapping up early, but I encourage you guys to ask away. All right, no one is asking away. All right then, so if no one has any extra questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. We're going to be posting this video once we have it uploaded. If you do have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. We're available at HMIS@thn.org. and a lot of you already have our number. I'm really excited that you guys came to this webinar. We have about 60 attendees, which is still pretty large. We don't really get that many attendees for any webinar. So that's always exciting. I'm glad that we are getting to talk with you guys a lot more and being able to reach a wider audience. Okay, so we're going to head and wrapping it up here. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. Thanks, Linda. She said we did a good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, guys, see you in the next webinar.
Have a good day.